Finally, I stepped back, gesturing toward the door you should go. I said, "You've got a long road ahead of you, and I'm not going to be a part of it." Lucy lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, a look of devastation etched into her features. But I felt nothing, just a cool, detached satisfaction. I watched her in my silence, speaking louder than any words could. After a long, hollow moment, she turned and walked out the door. As the door clicked shut, I felt an unexpected stillness settle over me, the anger, the bitterness. It had all burned out, leaving me with nothing but a sense of closure. I'd set the truth free, and now I was free as well. The house was quiet, almost unnaturally so, but it was I live with the beginning of a new life, one on honesty and resilience rather than deception and betrayal. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, feeling the weight of the past finally slip away. Hashtag. In the days after Lucy left, a strange calm filled the house, but it was the kind that almost felt like standing in the eye of a storm. I tried to tell myself I was done with her, that I'd moved on. Yet there was a hollow ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. The thrill of revenge, the satisfaction of seeing her lies exposed, had all faded, leaving only the quiet emptiness of a home that no longer felt like mine. Weeks passed in this void, and I kept busy trying to reclaim my life. I threw myself into work, met with friends who assured me I'd done the right thing, that I deserved better. And though I nodded along, I found myself waking in the middle of the night, haunted by memories of her. Every corner of the house was filled with reminders, her favorite mug still in the cupboard, her shampoo lingering in the shower, the faintest scent of her perfume embedded in the fabric of the couch. One evening, I returned home from work, flipping through the stack of mail I'd been letting pile up on the kitchen counter among the bills and junk mail. A small envelope caught my eye, my name scrawled across the front in Lucy's familiar handwriting. My stomach twisted as I tore it open, not sure whether I was expecting anger or apology or something else entirely. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and as I unfolded it, I saw her words, brief and shaky. "I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't. I know I've hurt you in a way that can't be undone, and I'll live with that every day. But there's something I never told you because I thought it was selfish to make this about me. The truth is, the affair was my way of running from a truth I was too afraid to face. Last year I was diagnosed with a heart condition. I didn't want to tell you, didn't want to make you pity me or worry about me. I thought if I pushed you away, if I broke us apart, you wouldn't be left picking up the pieces. But now I realize that was just another lie. I told myself to avoid facing my fear. You were my heart more than you'll ever know. I didn't deserve you. I only wanted to spare you the pain, but all I did was create a new one. I'm so sorry. Please remember me as I was before I let the fear take over. I loved you. I really did, Lucy." My hands shook as I set the letter down, and a hollow, sick feeling swept over me. Her words felt like a ghost lingering in the room when I couldn't push away, no matter how hard tried I, the close alone. I had taken it all as signs of her betrayal, her guilt, but now they looked different in hindsight. The next day I called her parents, desperate for any scrap of information. Her mother answered, and as soon as she heard my voice, there was a heavy pause. I asked about the letter, about the diagnosis. Barely able to get the words out, she sighed, and I heard the weariness in her voice. Yes, she was sick. Her mother finally said she didn't want to worry anyone, not you, not us. She thought she'd beat it if she just ignored it, pretended like nothing was wrong. There was a pause, her voice cracking. She always was stubborn. She didn't want to be seen as weak. After hanging up, I sat there for hours, staring at the walls of the house that suddenly felt even emptier than before. My mind kept returning to the letter, to all the mischances, the words I'd spoken in anger, the satisfaction I'd felt in watching her leave. All of it felt tainted now, the thrill of revenge soured by the truth I'd never known. Days bled into one another as I tried to shake off the weight of regret, but the nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, hearing the echoes of our conversations, of things we'd left unsaid, of the love we'd both lost in the fire of my anger. The small victories I'd savored now felt like hollow winds, each one pulling me deeper into a sadness I couldn't escape. A month later I got a call from her mother. Lucy had been admitted to the hospital in the early morning. Her heart had finally failed, and she had slipped away quietly in her sleep. The news hit me like a punch to the chest, and I sank to the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I tried to make sense of a world without her in it. I attended the funeral, standing at the back of the crowd, hidden among people who hadn't seen the side of her eye uncovered, who still saw her as she'd once been. Her parents glanced at me from a distance, offering a nod of acknowledgement, but we shared no words. There was nothing left to say as they lowered her into the ground. I felt the weight of my choices press down on me, the anger I'd clung to now nothing more than a memory. I'd wanted her to suffer to understand the pain she'd put me through. But now, as I looked at the coffin, a part of me wished I'd never pursued that path that I'd held onto her for just a little longer known the truth before it was too late. In the end, I was left with an emptiness that no amount of revenge could fill, an ache that stayed with me, like the ghost of a life I'd lost. Welcome to my Epic English channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The night I found the message was ordinary, or at least it started that way. Lucy and I had just wrapped up dinner, a simple meal of pasta and salad, nothing fancy. It was one of those quiet nights at home, just the two of us. She excused herself to take a shower, and I stayed in the kitchen, mindless, scrolling through my phone. The quietness of the house was comforting, or maybe it was just familiar. I wasn't paying attention to much of anything. When her phone, sitting beside mine on the counter, lit up out of habit, my eyes drifted to the screen. There it was clear as day, a message from an unfamiliar name that read asterisk, can't wait for tomorrow, babe asterisk. I stared at the phone, the words seeming to throb against the darkness of the screen. My hands suddenly felt clammy. I knew that feeling, that surge of adrenaline, when you know something's not right. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Babe, who the hell was calling her that? 100 thoughts swirled through my head as I stood there, rooted to the spot. I felt the urge to pick up the phone, to open that message, and confront whatever might come next. But something in me, a twisted curiosity mixed with a gnawing dread, made me stop. You don't want to know, a small voice inside me warned. But I ignored it. I couldn't help myself. My fingers hovered over the phone. I tapped it open with a mixture of dread and determination. Navigating to her messages there in plain sight was a string of texts, each one a testament to the reality I'd somehow missed. The conversation was brief but intimate. Words exchanged with the kind of ease that only comes with familiarity. Flirtations, inside jokes, even memories from what had to be shared moments. I could see her responses laced with emojis and affectionate terms I thought were reserved for us. It was surreal. All the subtle hints she dropped over the past few months, being distant the way her eyes darted to her phone, the sudden wardrobe upgrades. I was furious with myself for not seeing it sooner. The shower stopped running. I heard her footsteps, light and familiar, moving across the hall. Panicking, I set the phone down and leaned casually against the counter, as if nothing had happened. My heart was racing, my head was spinning, and my palms felt cold. She stepped into the kitchen, her hair wrapped in a towel, and gave me a soft smile. The kind I'd always thought meant, I love you now. It felt hollow. Hey, you, okay? She asked, noticing my expression. I forced a smile, my mind racing. Yeah, just thinking. She didn't press further, grabbing her phone and glancing at it before setting it back down. If she noticed anything unusual, she didn't show it, but I did. I watched the way she handled it, almost nervously, as if she were holding a ticking bomb. Maybe in a way, she was. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I remember sitting beside her on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in some movie she'd picked. But my mind was elsewhere. I was trying to make sense of what I'd seen, to understand how this woman I'd married, the woman I'd built, my life around, could be so deceptive. It was late when we finally crawled into bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her, even breathing beside me. How she fell asleep quickly, her face peaceful in the dim light. I could still remember when I'd watch her like this, marveling at how lucky I was tonight. trying to bustle my mind, a laugh as I climbed out from my bed, but slowly made my way back, trying to get my legs trying to get my legs underneath me. Dick and Doss? Hmm. I casually brought up the question that had been gnawing at me. So, got any plans tomorrow? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She glanced at me, her expression briefly flickering before she shrugged, just the usual errands catching up on some work. Her lie was as smooth as butter. I almost admired it. Asterisk, almost. Asterisk. I couldn't stand the sight of her calm indifference, her ease in deceiving me. The rest of the day passed like a bad dream. Everything seeming normal on the surface but turbulent beneath my thoughts, swung between confrontation and silence. Part of me wanted to lay everything out to ask her directly, to demand she explain herself, but another part of me, the part that knew her too well, knew she'd spin it, twist it somehow. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I kept quiet. But that night, after she fell asleep, I took her phone again. I needed to be sure I dug through her messages, her call logs, her social media accounts. Each discovery felt like a fresh wound, each piece of evidence a reminder of her betrayal. The texts were one thing, but there were photos, 2 candid shots of them together, smiles that used to be just for me. I felt something in me snap. The next morning, I barely touched my breakfast. Lucy asked if I was feeling okay, her voice filled with genuine-sounding concern. I could barely look at her. I managed a vague excuse about work stress and left the house early. But work was the last thing on my mind. Instead, I drove to a secluded parking beneath a thick canopy of trees and sat there, breathing hard. Anger pulsed through me, a mix of rage and heartbreak that felt foreign and overpowering. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a mockery of everything we'd built together. I spent hours in that car watching people pass by, feeling like a ghost in my own life. And when I finally drove home, it was dark and Lucy was already asleep. I climbed into bed, lying there for hours, my mind whirling with plans, ideas, possibilities. This wasn't something I could ignore, and it wasn't something I'd let her get away with. The next few days became a silent investigation. I gathered details, looking through everything I could, her bank statements, credit card bills, even her work emails. I pieced together her lies, her little escapades, every hidden weekend and business dinner that had all been elaborate cover-ups. And the more I found, the more I understood the scale of her deceit. This wasn't just a fling, some impulsive mistake. She'd created an entire double life. One evening, after I'd collected all the evidence I needed, I sat across from her in the kitchen. She was on her phone, scrolling through a social media feed, oblivious to the storm brewing on my end of the table. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Lucy, I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Her eyes met mine, widening slightly. But she quickly composed herself. "What do you mean?" I held her gaze, feeling the anger simmer beneath my skin. "You've been lying to me," and I know there was a moment of silence so thick I could feel it pressing against my chest. Lucy's face paled, her eyes darting to the side as she tried to collect herself. It's nothing serious," she stammered. "It's just a fling. It doesn't mean anything." For words hung in the air, as hollow and meaningless as they sounded in that moment. I saw her for who she truly was, not the woman I'd loved, but someone else, entirely, someone I didn't recognize. "You need to leave," I said quietly, my voice steady, even as my hands trembled beneath the table. Now, after that night, I knew there was no going back, but something stopped me from just ending it. Then and there, I wanted to see it through. I wanted her to know that I wasn't some blind fool. She could walk all over. I wanted her to feel just a fraction of the humiliation and betrayal she'd put me through. So I decided to play along for now, to let her think I was swallowing her excuses, even giving her another chance. Inside, though, I was simmering with plans, carefully crafted, like a ticking time bomb. The next morning, I played my part. When I got up, I forced a hellfire and threw in some distant warmth. I wasn't going to make it that easy for her to guess what I had in mind. For her, it seemed like a fresh start, a chance to put her so-called mistake behind us. She'd think I was buying her flimsy promises and reheated apologies. But every word, every glance, felt like nails on a chalkboard as she moved around the house with forced cheer. I could feel her relief settling in, as if she believed she'd dodged a bullet. Days turned into weeks, and I kept my cards close, all while gathering more evidence. I tracked everything now. She didn't even know I'd installed the GPS app on her phone, letting me see her exact location whenever she claimed to be somewhere else. With every lie I cataloged another piece of ammunition. I wanted her to feel blindsided, betrayed, like I had only worse. One Saturday morning I had to suppress a bitter laugh when she cheerfully mentioned she'd be out running errands. That day I planned a little setup of my own. I watched her leave with a fake smile, and then grabbed my phone. Following her every move on the GPS, she drove straight across town to a hotel on the outskirts, where I watched her dot sit motionless in the parking lot for a good 15 minutes. I could practically see her in my mind, checking her reflection, fixing her hair, adjusting her lipstick. Every detail made my blood simmer. Finally, she walked inside. I waited, feeling the minutes crawl by until she emerged 2 hours later. That was when I drove over and sat in my car, parked across the lot waiting. I'd wanted to see her face to feel that satisfying confirmation, as if any more was needed, that my suspicions had been right, and there she was strolling out with a lightness I hadn't seen in years, as if she was living out some fantasy. Thinking she was clever and subtle, I let her leave, feeling the weight of that moment settle inside me. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. By the time I got home, Lucy was already there, curled up on the couch with a book in her hands, looking like she hadn't a care in the world. She greeted me with a smile, and it took everything in me not to show how much I despised her in that instant. Instead, I dropped a kiss on her cheek and said nothing about where she'd been. Over the next few weeks, I slowly put together my next steps. I'd never been one for drama, but this situation called for it. I wanted my move to be subtle yet devastating. My patience was paying off and each piece was falling into place, but the real victory would be in the final reveal. I wasn't going to just pack my bags and walk out, no. I wanted her to sit with her lies to see how they'd eaten away at everything she thought she had. The first piece of my plan was setting up our accounts. I'd always handled the finances, and over the years I'd built up enough in my own savings to cover a fresh start. But now I started siphoning more strategically, little by little, shifting money from our shared account into one. I'd opened under my name alone. Lucy didn't notice, or if she did, she said nothing. I guess she was too busy planning her rendezvous to bother with the household expenses. One Friday night she mentioned she'd be working late, a new project that required her attention. I fought back a smirk and just nodded, saying I'd take care of dinner. As soon as she left, I went to work. I'd gotten in touch with a lawyer the week before and had everything lined up for a quick, clean divorce. Once I hit the trigger, but I was still waiting for the right moment, one that would leave her reeling, just as she'd left me. That night I lay in bed, going over every detail. I prepared the documents, gathered proof, and made sure our friends and family would understand the truth. I wasn't going to let her spin this story to her advantage. She'd lose everything she tried to hold on to with one false move. My patience, my quiet resolve had become my weapon. I was going to make her regret every careless, deceitful word, every empty promise, and every single lie. The next morning I made her breakfast. It was one of those little rituals. She always used to love pancakes with berries, coffee, just the way she liked it. She came into the kitchen with a smile, as if she thought we were some perfect couple, some untouched fantasy. But today I looked at her with a newfound detachment. I could see through her now, every word she spoke carrying a hollowness. I couldn't unseen as we ate. I could feel her studying me, wondering if I'd ever bring it up, if I'd forgive her. She didn't realize I had no intention of forgiving anything. I was simply biding my time. "Thank you for making breakfast," she said, softly reaching across the table to place her hand over mine. I wanted to pull back, but I let her hold it, smiling as if I were grateful. All I could think was how satisfying it would be to watch her expression crumble. Finally, I looked at her and gave her what I knew. She wanted a glimmer of reassurance. "I've been thinking," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Maybe we can work things out, try to get past everything." She exhaled, relief washing over her face, and I could see how badly she wanted to believe I'd given in. I was offering her a lifeline, and she was so eager to grab hold of it to keep spinning her tangled web. Little did she know I was setting her up to feel what it was like to be blindsided. "Yes," she said, squeezing my hand, her voice breathy with excitement. "I was hoping you'd feel that way. I know I made a mistake, but it's behind us now." I watched her fighting back a smile as she leaned into the fantasy she thought she created. "Of course," I replied. My voice steady. "We can get past this," and as she beamed, unaware of the trap she'd willingly walked into. I felt that same anger simmering beneath my skin, this time tinged with satisfaction. She thought she had fooled me, but the real fool was sitting right across the table. Over the next few days I became an actor in my own life, playing the part of the forgiving husband. I put on the mask of someone working toward a future, someone who had let go of the past. Lucy, blinded by her relief, seemed more at ease than she had in weeks. She was back to her cheerful self, filling our days with small talk and her usual routines, oblivious to the reckoning, waiting just around the corner. I could see her confidence growing. She'd brush past me in the mornings, give me a quick kiss before dashing out the door, leaving a scent of perfume and carefully rehearsed innocence behind. The satisfaction of knowing what she thought she'd escaped was bittersweet, though every glance, every smile she threw my way only fueled the fire inside me. She thought she had won, that her flimsy apology had been enough to save her from the consequences of her actions. The climax of my plan was near, and I could feel it building inside me, urging me to act. But timing was everything. I wasn't going to rush it. Not now, after I'd waited so long. A week later, I got my chance. Lucy mentioned an upcoming business dinner, a last-minute event with clients she'd been working hard to impress. The irony wasn't lost on me. I nodded, forcing myself to look mildly disinterested while inside. I knew this would be the night. I'd set everything in motion. That evening as she left, I watched her slip out in a sleek black dress I hadn't seen before, her hair styled in soft waves. She glanced back at me, flashing a quick smile before shutting the door behind her. As soon as I heard the faint click of her heels fade down the hallway, I moved to gather the final pieces. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd created, containing every bit of evidence I'd amassed. Screenshots of messages, receipts from hotel stays, even the locations ID tracked on her phone. All of it lay there staring back at me in grim confirmation. I'd prepared an email to her family and close friends, laying out the entire story with an unflinching, matter-of-fact tone. I wanted them to see it all, to understand exactly what kind of person Lucy had become. After sending the email to the family, I made a few calls, her parents, friends, even her boss. Each conversation was brief and carefully crafted. I wanted them to know the truth, but I also wanted them to see that I was calm, composed, handling this with dignity. With each call, the facade that Lucy had built over the years was beginning to crumble, piece by piece. Finally, I called our bank, initiating the transfer of funds from our joint account into my private one, leaving her just enough to cover her immediate expenses. It was petty perhaps, but necessary. I wasn't going to leave her high and dry, but I wanted her to feel the consequences of her betrayal in every possible way. Then came the part I'd been anticipating the most, the message to her. I crafted it carefully, a few pointed lines to let her know that her lies had unraveled and that I'd had enough. I hit send and watched the screen, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me like a final seal on everything we'd shared. An hour passed. I sat in the quiet of the house waiting for her to return, my heart steady, my mind clear. Soon the door creaked open, and I heard the click of her heels on the tile. She entered the room, her face flushed, eyes bright, until she saw me standing there. The expression on her face froze as she took in the look in my eyes. "Did you have a good time?" I asked, voice steady, betraying none of the fury inside. Lucy's smile faltered. "It was fine," she said, her voice softer, more cautious. "Now just a work thing. Is that what you're calling it now, a work thing?" I could see her realize right in that moment that the jig was up. Her eyes widened, mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. She looked at me then, at her phone, a flash of panic crossing her face as she saw the notifications from her family, friends, even her boss. What is this?" she stammered, scrolling through the messages in shock. "It's the truth, Lucy, the truth. I've known for a while now." I kept my voice steady, watching her struggle to process the realization. The satisfaction was icy and clean, sharper than any words I could say. Her face went pale. You told everyone." "Yes," I said, crossing my arms. "I told everyone. I wanted them to see who you really are, just like I've come to see it." She gaped at me, her composure slipping, her eyes welling with tears that I no longer found even remotely convincing. She reached out a hand as if to touch me, to find some scrap of sympathy or forgiveness in my eyes. But I stayed rooted in place. "Please, we can work this out," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I made a mistake, but don't ruin everything over this." Ruin. I let out a hollow laugh. "You think I ruined this? You've been the one lying, sneaking around, treating me like a fool. I simply made sure everyone else knows the truth now, too." Her breathing quickened, the panic rising as reality sank in. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't leave me." I felt a pang, a brief moment where I saw her as the woman I'd once loved. But the hurt and betrayal were too fresh, too vivid, and whatever feelings I'd once had for her had withered under the weight of her deceit. "Lucy, you did this," I said coldly. "I've been patient, I've been understanding, and I gave you the chance to be honest. You chose to lie, to pretend to think you could get away with it, and now you have to live with the consequences." She looked down, defeated, her shoulders slumping. She seemed smaller, now diminished somehow, as if her lies had been the only thing keeping her together. I watched her as she grasped for words for anything that could undo what had already been done. But I was beyond her reach, beyond her. "Please."